Hey everyone, it's Chrissy at Pinovate. Welcome to our DIY wooden quilt tutorial. So for this tutorial, you may have our DIY delivery kit, or you may have our Love for Lewiston charity kit. It is the same process. They look slightly different, but all of the instruction is the same. So whichever kit you have, let's get it out and we'll make it together. Okay, so let's go through your kit. You have lots of goodies in here. You're first going to have a 12 by 12 wooden square. You're going to have 4 long skinny pieces for the edge of your puzzle. You're going to have all of your puzzle pieces together. You're going to have a sheet where you can plan and prep your colors and where you want them to go. You're going to have glue, makeup sponges, a foam brush, selection of paint, and some sandpaper. If you have our Love for Lewiston kit, you are also going to get several different additional logos that you can add on top afterwards. So let's get all your stuff together and let's make it. So our very first step is we want to sand our board and make sure that it's nice and smooth all around the edges. No little prickles or slivers anywhere. So with your sandpaper, just give your whole board a really good rub. So before we start painting, we want to actually plan it out. So on your sheet that you have, you can mark each piece what color you want to paint them. And remember, if you have black and white, you can always mix it to create a gray. You can always leave some of them neutral wood color as well. So you have many, many options with the colors that you are given. So I have planned out all my pieces, and I'm going to start by painting my base board as well as my edges. So I wanted to make sure that I'm painting the correct side of these edges. So I just did a quick placement where I want them to be, so I know that these are all correct. And I'm going to start painting. So I'm gonna do my board red and my edges red. And I'm gonna use my foam brush, nice long strokes all the way back and forth, and using all the paint in your brush. You can always add more paint later, but it's hard to take it off. If you make a nice thin coat, it's easier to dry, and then you can always do a second coat afterwards if needed. Okay, so my board is all painted, and I also painted the edges of it so it has a nice clean finish. And I'm moving on to my puzzle pieces here. So this is the border of your board, and on here we're going in with my foam brush as well, because I'm doing the same color, a tiny little bit of paint, and I want this to be just a small amount. I'm only painting the very, very top. Okay, so we don't want it along the edges, as if we get too much paint along the edges, our puzzle pieces aren't going to fit together again. It's a very snug fit as it is, so we want to make sure that we're only painting the very top of our pieces. So you can do this with your foam brush. If you're very, very gentle, a little bit of paint. Or alternately, if you're struggling with this, you can also use one of your makeup sponges. So with your makeup sponge, if you take the back end, take a small amount of paint, very small amount, take a little bit off, and you're actually going to just dab straight up and down on your brush or on your board. Painting with your makeup sponge is more precise along the edges, so the choice is up to you. So I have done one coat of paint on my edges here. If you find that it's not quite dark enough, let it dry and then do a second coat. All right, so my base and my edges are drying, and I'm ready to move on to my puzzle pieces and painting. So I have everything prepped. I know where I want my colors to go. And I'm actually gonna leave some of them just plain wood. So I'm gonna pop those out first so they're done. And I'm gonna give them a little bit of a sand to make sure that all the coloring and edges are looking beautiful. So I'm gonna pop out all of my plain pieces that I'm going to use. And I'm just going to take my sandpaper and make sure all of my edges are nice and soft. And I'm going to do that with all of them. Okay, so I have pulled out all of the pieces that I want to leave plain wood and I've sanded them. So I'm just gonna push those off to the side and I'm gonna move on to painting. Okay, so I have pulled all the pieces out that I'm going to be painting white and I gave them a quick little sand to make sure that they're prepped. So for painting our puzzle pieces, we definitely want to use our makeup sponge. This is going to be the easiest way and the cleanest way. So I'm going to paint all of these pieces white. So I'm going to go into my white paint, take a little dab, okay, and then I'm actually gonna dab most of it off. I don't want too much on there. I can always add more later. And I'm going to go straight up and down onto my pieces because it's very important that we do not get any paint along the edges. Our pieces sit very, very close together, and if there's too much paint in between, our puzzle won't go back together properly. So I want to make sure that I'm just dabbing straight up and down, a nice thin coat. And then if I need to do a second coat, I can always come back and do that afterwards. But again, we want nice thin coats so it dries evenly and properly. Okay, so I've painted one coat on my white pieces. I'm going to let it dry and then do a second coat. Okay, so I've pulled out my next pieces here and I've already sanded them in preparation for painting. So these ones are going to be black and I'm going to use the same method. I'm going to use a makeup sponge and my black paint in the exact same manner. Okay, so I've finished my black pieces. I'm just going to wait till they dry and do a second coat. Okay, so I'm on my last few pieces of my puzzle and I'm actually gonna paint these gray. So in order to make a gray, we have to mix black and white together. So with my paint, I'm gonna take a smidgen of my white and an even smaller smidgen of my black, just the tiniest bit. And I'm going to mix that until I find a gray that I like. Now, if you have any color, you can add white to it to make a lighter tint. So you're not stuck with only the colors that you have. You can always mix and create more. Okay, so I like that gray. Now I'm going to paint these last four in the exact same manner with a makeup sponge. Okay, so I've finished my gray. I'm going to let that dry and give that a second coat as well. So while my puzzle pieces are drying, I'm back to my board that is now dry and I'm going to assemble all of my edges on here. So it's important that they do measure up equally in the corners. on every corner to ensure that all of the pieces will fit on the inside. Now your pieces on your edge may overhang your board slightly, and that's okay. That's totally normal. We just want to make sure that we have the proper spacing on the inside for your puzzle pieces. Now, in your kit, you're going to have a little tube of E6000 glue. This tiny little tube is more than enough to do your whole puzzle. Okay, so I'm going to glue on my edges, and to do this, I just need a tiny little bit all the way down. So I'm just gonna do tiny little polka dots all the way along here. Okay, and then I'm going to place it on my board. Now with E6000, it does have some wiggle room for about half an hour. It does need to set for 30 minutes before it does become solid. So we do have some room and some time to be able to shift it around if needed. So I'm just gonna keep going. Okay, so I have all my 4 pieces on there, and I just want to make sure that these corners are all lined up nicely, that nothing is out or misaligned at all. So this is where we can wiggle it around a little bit to ensure that it is lined up properly. And once you're happy with how it is, we're letting that sit for half an hour. If you have our Love for Lewiston charity kit, you are also going to get 3 additional logos that you can actually put right on top of your quilted puzzle. This is a perfect time to paint them while your glue is setting. So paint them in the exact same manner that we've been doing our puzzle pieces. And again, you can do any color you like. All right, so I am all set. My board is ready to go. I'm gonna start gluing all of my puzzle pieces back in here. So again, with your E6000 glue, you're just gonna go piece by piece and slowly build your puzzle on the inside. So using your glue, again, you are only using a small, tiny little dot of glue on the back. You do not need much at all. So I have glued down all the pieces to my wooden quilt, and I'm all done. So if you have our regular quilt kit, so this is where you would finish. So you can either glue all your pieces down and use it as a decor piece, or you can actually leave them out and use it as a puzzle, whichever you like. If you have our Love for Lewiston collection, you do have the opportunity to place your extra little pieces right on top. Thank you so much for following along our wooden quilts tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and had so much fun. I bet they look beautiful. If you tag us on Instagram at Pinovate and DIY Delivery, we get to see your work and we love to see it and share it. So please follow us on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and Pinterest and Twitter, all of the things. So thanks again for following along. See you soon.